Okay, the other day when I was talking, I said that lordshippers and legalists, really, when they ask you, hey, are you just saying that I can do whatever I want and still stay saved? You know, they're denigrating the gospel of grace, accusing us of telling them to go sin. And I said that secretly, actually they're revealing something about themselves, which is that they really are looking for permission. And I wanted to talk a little more about that. Okay, if you're a legalist and you don't believe the gospel of grace, you are unregenerated. Or maybe you were saved, but you're unclear to the point that you've fallen from grace. Either way, as you're living as an unregenerate person, and that means you do not have a source in you to constrain you with the love of Christ and draw you with the cords of His love to seek His face and enjoy Him. You don't have that at all. All you have is the terror of the law, the fear of His judgment on the one hand. Your Christ is the Christ of imagination. He's a historical figure that you know is the King. You believe He's risen, but you don't know how to be related to Him. So therefore you have His pending judgment, and your life here, which is not a life of faith. He's not real to you in your everyday life. So as long as His law can motivate you with fear, and the pending judgment can motivate you with fear, you will attempt to restrain the flesh. But the other thing you have, besides the law and the fear and your imaginary Christ, is your flesh, which hungers and thirsts and lusts continually. And you're left to your flesh to fight the flesh because you don't have another source in you to mortify the deeds of the flesh. You don't have the Spirit because you're not regenerated, because you don't believe the gospel. Or if you do have the Spirit, He's been quenched because you're not believing the gospel. Same thing. Well, the thing is now, with only the fear to rule and motivate you to fight the sinful urges of your flesh, and having only the flesh to fight with, when you go about your daily life and that fear is not present and manifested, then you're left in self-indulgence. And there's nothing else other than to indulge your appetites. Now, here's the thing. When I got I was in the charismatic church for 8 years, and then I was in this small little mystical legalist church for 9 years, and we were so isolated that I wasn't really familiar with the landscape. And I ended up going to a Reformed church after that to recover, and I was so backslidden that I wasn't going to judge anybody. I'd completely collapsed at that point. I'd lost everything. Anyway, I didn't know anything about the Reformed landscape or the mindset, and I said in another video that compared to what we'd been through, I looked at these people as like tepid and lukewarm and worldly. And they were zealous. They were zealous, reformed young people. And you know what I noticed about them almost immediately when I joined their small groups? Was that their whole thing was about indulging as much flesh as they could possibly get away with and figuring out where the boundary is. And they loved microbreweries, beer, wine, smoking cigars and pipes, and hookah, which is that water pipe thing. And they talked about it at length, and that's almost all they talked about, unless we were talking about, if it was Bible time, we'd all sit around and they would talk about, and I noticed these people are the first people I had met that actually openly said that they believed that Christians were under the moral law of Moses for a rule of life. for justification and sanctification, really. And I was surprised that they could be that dumb. And yet they seem to be intellectually oriented. But they were biblically ignorant, and they clearly were allegorizing huge sections of the scripture. So I was learning by groping in the dark. What is it these people believe, But they were legalists who were unsaved, and they knew they needed to be religious, and so there was a certain amount of fear because they did believe Jesus in a sense, and that motivated them with fear to draw to the law and try to figure out, okay, what can I do? And that's what it was all about. It was about how much can I get away with? And the thing is that I happen to know some of them run headlong eventually into major sin. Because once that motive is gone, the flesh is just going to rule you. Because they don't know the power of the sin nature. They don't know. They think they can restrain it, and eventually it overtakes them like it did with Cain. He didn't think he was going to kill Abel. God warned him, though. Sin is lurking, And they didn't understand this. And the pastor, and that was a gigantic congregation. I mean, we're talking thousands. It's one of the biggest in our city with 3 locations. Lead pastor fell into some stuff and had to step down. And, it's funny because the last message I heard at church, and I actually just walked out, was he said, we are under the moral law. We were set free from the ceremonial law, but the law of Moses, written on stone, the 10 Commandments, is still in effect. And I was just like, this is false teaching. I gotta go. That was the most blatantly it had been stated. But now looking back, when I have a Lord Shipper come up to me and say, what, are you saying I can just do whatever I want and get away with it and still be saved? They're actually asking for permission in the secret of their heart, whether you realize it or they realize it, because they're living their life trying to figure out the boundaries of what they can get away with, because all they have is their flesh, their appetites, and their fear. That's it. Those are the 2 things that motivate them. And they'll even say, one said, well, if we can't live a righteous life here, then what's the point of even being saved? Our point is because we are being betrothed to our bridegroom, and we're going to be married to him for eternity. Don't you care about that at all? They're fully fixed on earth. Heavenly things are just, might as well be a Greco-Roman mythology to them, because they've allegorized all of it, and they don't have a kingdom, and they don't have anything literal to look forward to. And so really it's just a fuzzy imaginary off in the distance thing, and that can only motivate you so long in this world. And so when that motivation slips, they go into all manner of indulgence. Now hopefully their legalistic approach will bring them close enough to the law that when they do fall into sin, they'll finally fear enough to wake up and believe the gospel. So that's my hope. And these people, the ones that get on YouTube and everything, they're wolves. These people that I met weren't wolves. They were nice people that meant well, but didn't have a clue. And it's sad, and they were in bondage. I'm sad for them. I don't have any kind of anger towards them. I do have anger towards the ones that try to put you in subjection. But they weren't really trying to do that. They were just kind of cluelessly groping along and trying to figure it out, and under this really unhealthy teaching. And I don't think most of them were saved, but the ones that were absolutely without knowledge, so they couldn't protect themselves from this legalistic theology that was sucking the life out of them and giving them no power for victory. All right, I'll talk to you later. That's all I wanted to say.